The cyberspace is home to billions of people and is the right platform you need to grow your business. The Center for Innovation and Technology is offering you a golden opportunity to speak directly to your market at an affordable price. We also offer media training workshops, live streaming, documentary production, and events management. Get in touch with us today on the following numbers: +263 867 711 0290 or 0718 100 235. Don't forget to subscribe to our social media platforms. Like our Facebook page, Center for Innovation and Technology. Follow us on Twitter @SiteZW. And you can also check out our website, www.site.org.zw. You can also visit our offices at 45 Moffat Avenue, Hillside, Bulawayo. Take advantage of this opportunity to expand your business.
The consequence was that he was actually suppressing Zimbabweans and causing harm and destruction to Zimbabwe. But what does he turn up when the world then imposes restrictions, travel restrictions on him and his regime? He says, no, these are illegal. And why should people hate me on this? And he becomes pathological about Britain.
If you want this inclusive government to deliver hope to the people of Zimbabwe, then you must regard the MDC as an equal partner, not as a junior partner. We are not a junior partner when we have got the mandate of the people.
I must say I joined the labor movement in 1986 in May. At the time when we joined the labor movement, it was a boring place. You may recall those that lived through that space, that the news about the ZCTU always was negative. It was always about money stolen somewhere. It was always about ZCTU not using the materials that had been donated by the Yugoslavian government, that ZCTU had no clue how to use it. The dictum then was that ZCTU and ZANU were one. That was basically the slogan then. And the demands from labor basically were to be included in the parliament. I think you remember Mtandare always agitated that, oh, you must include us, we are part of ZANU. So when Morgan emerged in 1988, rather reluctantly, because at the Congress, extraordinary Congress, it just come from Bindura. He joined the Mine Workers Union as one of the vice presidents. And the Mine Workers Union was one of the better organized unions there. So at the Congress, there was a crisis of leadership at the ZCTU. This General Secretary had just been removed from office for embezzlement of funds. As part of the crisis that I've already highlighted, characterized the ZCTU then. Then they were looking for someone that could bring back, or reorganize the labor movement. And I remember at the Congress in Gweru, the idea was to bring the identified Chikerema, Charles Chikerema. And at the last minute, Chikerema indicated that he was related to the president, then Prime Minister Mugabe, and that it would be very difficult for him to occupy that position. In the wee hours of the morning, just before the elections, the name of Morgan Tsvangirai came up. And at the elections, he won and became Secretary General. What is quite interesting is that he radicalized the labor movement and changed the whole course of the trade unions in Zimbabwe. Firstly, he created an independent body. You may recall then that after the 1987 unit talks, between ZAPU and ZANU, the new agenda of the government was to create a one-party state. And that was one of the major rallying points of the labor movement, the fight against the introduction or imposition of the one-party state. And I recall vividly in October 1989, the students went on strike at the university. They were under Adam Ndebele. And the ZCTU issued a very strong statement castigating government for the manner in which they dealt with the students. And what is very interesting, the reason why I'm highlighting this is that after that incident, Morgan Tsvangirai was arrested. He was put on leg irons and was used as an example. They walked up and down Jason Street, just as an example to anyone else. There was a very important lesson that was to be heard from there, that basically, if any struggle was elitist without sort of the backing of the grassroots, it was not going to be sustainable. I think that was the major thing that was learned there. And for thereafter, I think it was quite interesting that Morgan devised the strategy of basically mobilizing from below, so that the issues were demand-driven from the issues that they were raised from the grassroots. And remember, Mashikada, that we started going right around the country. It became such an exciting thing to be part of that project, organizing people around the issues that were coming from the grassroots. So the idea about that was that if you arrest a leader, it was of no consequence, simply because the issue resonated right across the country. And what was very interesting is that the major shift came with the introduction of structural adjustment. And you may recall that the trade unions were one of the major stakeholders that were very much against structural adjustment. And I think what is very critical, and what we remember Morgan for, is the benefit that he brought together a team of experts, John Zulu and Mama Shekada, who started working around structural adjustment. He argued that it was not good enough to just critique structural adjustment without providing solutions. So we went right around the country, identifying what people's experiences were in structural adjustment. And we came up, I think most of you are aware of the Beyond ESA study. As a result of that, we went right around the country, mobilizing people around the issues they raised. It was an amazing experience with the labor forums, etc., that emerged. And what is quite interesting also is that we started building beyond sort of the bread and butter issues of the labor movement, the narrow bread and butter issues, to develop a social union movement which linked workplace issues with community issues, which linked struggles beyond the workplace, networking with other stakeholders. That's when in 1997 we had the emergence of the National Constitutional Assembly to begin to advocate around issues of constitutionalism. That's when the later on crisis coalition emerged, etc. ZCTU started moving beyond just trade union, narrow trade union agendas. And this culminated in 1999 with the organization of the Working People's Working Convention, where more than 40 civil society groups came together. What is very interesting about this development is that it became the basis for the emergence of the MDC, where other initiatives had failed. Remember the Zoom experience, the Zoom experience, which had failed because they were elitist top-down experiences. This movement could not be stopped simply because it was identifying with the real issues, the anti-neoliberal sentiments and the anti-authoritarianism that was emerging then. So what is interesting then is that it could not be stopped. The draconian measures that were used to try and stop that movement could not stop it. And what was also interesting about Morgan's approach was that after anything, any initiative, demonstration, etc., would sit around, you would commission a study to look at where we did well, where we didn't do well, etc. And the likes of René Lowenson, the likes of Richard Saunders would assist us with analysis, independent analysis, so that we reinforce this war movement from below. So what is quite interesting there is that the movement for democratic change was able to emerge and sustain itself on the fuel, on the wings of the people, the demands of the people basically became the wind that drove the sails of this movement. And hence up to now, we're still talking about it, despite what is happening, all these other issues. So in concluding, basically, we remember Morgan's legacy for what he did in the labor movement. And as a result of what he did for ZCTU in Zimbabwe, he was basically promoted, he was seconded to head the labor movement in the region in Southern Africa in 1996 or about 1996, yeah. He was given that authority to basically not only look at Zimbabwean issues, but at the regional issues. Because the argument then was that structural adjustment does not just affect Zimbabwe. The whole region, Zambia, Malawi, and other countries, Mozambique, had also gone through similar experiences. So in essence, therefore, for me, having worked for 10 years with Morgan, we remember him for energizing the labor movement, for developing an independent movement from below. And basically, the whole movement for democratic change emerged basically based on this new approach or social union movement that went beyond the bread and butter issues.
Today, I just want to appreciate and acknowledge the work that Morgan Richard Tsvangirai did. He inspired us, the younger generation, to speak out. He inspired us to stand against all the odds, to defend ourselves from injustice, from oppression, and to be able to dream and to live our dreams. And as a former trade unionist, he gave us strength. He encouraged us to fight for our rights, which we still have not been able to achieve. We still haven't managed to achieve labor justice in Zimbabwe, which is a struggle that we have to continue unabated. He taught us to stand up firm against all adversities. The perseverance, his selflessness, how he even sacrificed the presidential seat so that people will not continue being violated and being abused. The level of selflessness that the late Dr. Morgan Richard Tsvangirai had is one value that we have to carry with us, the leaders of today and tomorrow. We have to think first about the human beings, about sustainable human development, and ensure that his legacy lives on. Long live the spirit of Dr. Morgan Richard Tsvangirai.
But I just want to kick off on the year 1988, after very successful student demonstrations that we did at the University of Zimbabwe. Morgan Tsvangirai gave a solidarity speech which plunged him into trouble. When he was arrested, he was taken around the country blindfolded in many prisons. This I got to know when he was now narrating his ordeal. They took him to Goromonzi, they took him to Marondera, they took him to Wawa, and we were all wondering where he was detained, because we didn't have as much press as we have today. Until they finally put him in Goromonzi. And Goromonzi was a notorious prison. If you were put in Goromonzi, you really know that you're in trouble. But the person who saved him was none other than Mike Beamer. So Mike Beamer learned that, oh, my homeboy, Morgan Tsvangirai, is in trouble. So Mike Beamer used his influence. By then, I think he was in industry. He used his influence to talk to Mugabe, and all that advocacy took place. And then through Mike Beamer, of course, the international community and SADC and everybody was also making noises. So Tsvangirai got released the same year, I think after 2 months or so in detention because of Mike Beamer. I joined ZCTU in 1991. In fact, Morgan Tsvangirai interviewed me for a job as a young economist. I was filling in the shoes of Godfrey, because Godfrey had found a place to do his master's at Sussex, at IDS, Sussex, with Mkoma, Joe, Mzulu. They had gone to further their studies in Sussex. So he was a young man who was stepping in the shoes of the giant Godfrey Kanyenze. But I must say that my experience of him was that he was an organizational builder. That's why I think he was able to build MDC in the later years. When I joined, when ZCTU, when he was the Secretary General, as said by Kanyenze, the ZCTU had 3 employees: Morgan, Godfrey, then we had a sweeper called Sister Viola, and a bookkeeper, Chirep. It was just about 4 people. But here steps in Morgan, because he was an organizational builder. He started modernizing ZCTU, creating technical departments, health and safety, economics and research, organizing, education, international relations, and all those many technical departments. So he was an organizational builder. I think that's one characteristic that we can learn from Morgan. Fast forward, we all know that because he wanted to win the trade union movement from ZANU-PF. You know, in 1981, the ZANU-PF government amalgamated all trade unions. There was, white collar unions and blue collar unions. Morgan Tsvangirai managed to amalgamate them into one, ZCTU, and tried to win it from government. And he said, I'm here to represent workers. I'm not a socialist, I'm not a capitalist, because during those days, ideologies were very prevalent. But he managed to steer the course of workers, of trade unionism, without aligning himself to a particular ideology, which was very difficult in those years. And I think Ibu can attest to that. You wouldn't really be a neutral person. You would either to be a bourgeoisie or a capitalist. And Ibu was being accused of being a bourgeoisie during those days. But he was right. He was right. So fast forward, he again got into trouble when we were at Chester House. We had moved from Pockets building, just on Moyo. We had gone to Chester House. We all know what happened when he was almost thrown outside the window by an identified man, because he was becoming too vocal. His cleverness was that he was able to identify the structural problem in Zimbabwe, that it was not a labor issue, it was not anything, it was a governance issue. So he became to integrate governance issues in the advocacy of trade unions, and he got into trouble. He was saved by his secretary, Edith Mnyaka, when he was almost falling off the window at Chester House. So that was Morgan. He was a fearless man, a brave man, which I think all of you will agree. But in that bravery, he was a humble man, a very soft-hearted man. He could forgive. He was not a bitter man. Even after the attempted attack at Chester House, he still could forgive. He later identified who the attackers were, but he was not a bitter man. Now, in the late 80s, in the late 90s, fast forward, Godfrey has already talked about structural adjustment program, which we resisted. And we did the Beyond ESA project. But in the late 1990s, specifically 1998, he went right around the country. Again, I said he was an organizational builder. He didn't do things unilaterally as a leader. He wanted to see what the people were saying, what the people were thinking. His conscience was always to err on the side of the people. What do the people say? What do the people feel? What do the people think? So with the 1998 Working People's Convention in Hillside, after consulting all grassroots organizations, including that women organization in Bulawayo, ORAP, it was called ORAP. So with a successful Working People's Convention, where civil society, everybody came. And Morgan was outstanding. He really proved that he was a leader with the potential to lead organizations. And when the National Convention had a resolution that we need now to form a movement of the working class people to bring about democratic change, I think that was the resolution. A movement, a labor-backed movement to bring about democratic change. Morgan didn't just say, okay, the National Working People's Convention have given me the go-ahead. No. He said, I'm working for a trade union. I can't just do a political party. He had to convene an extraordinary congress of the ZCTU, the same year in 1998, to get an endorsement from the labor movement that you guys, you can give birth to a political movement. And we did an extraordinary congress of the ZCTU at Mandela training, at the ZESA training center, where the labor movement was given a clear mandate to facilitate the formation of a party. That was Morgan Tsvangirai. He was a process person. He was a procedural person. He could just have said, okay, the convention has given me this green light, but he convened an extraordinary congress. And of course, formation of MDC is all in the public domain. When he was at MDC, he was a team builder. he always wanted to make decisions based on consensus. That was very important. He tried to do consensus building. Of course, splits came, one in 2005, another in 2014. But all the time, he had wanted to have a united democratic movement in Zimbabwe to confront the Robert Mugabe regime. That's why one of his legacy is that he has got the MDC alliance. He was always talking of unity, one big tent. No one is more important than the other. He was talking about a big tent, and he left. We are happy that he left a legacy of one big tent, where the democratic forces can coalesce to present one common front to fight the system. So I can say that we have lost an icon, a humble person who actually became an international figure, from Humanikwa village in Boera to the corridors of Washington, London, Berlin, you name it. They all knew Morgan Tsvangirai. He was a self-educated man. That's why a university in South Korea saw it fit to award him an honorary doctorate in 2011 in recognition of his prowess as a leader. It's very, during the inclusive government, we now had the slogan, $2 for two. That was his legacy. Stabilizing the macroeconomic environment, softening the political crisis, and so on and so forth. But this does not mean that he was a perfect man, no. He had his own fair share of weaknesses, which are in the public domain. But I think his strengths as a unifier and a peace builder dwarf all those weaknesses that have come to the public domain. No wonder why his funeral was almost parallel to that of Joshua Ngomo. You know, it was a funeral of the year, because all people across the political divide, across all shades of class interest in society in Zimbabwe, descended to pay their farewell respect to this icon, this self-educated trade unionist, Morgan Tsvangirai. In summary, he changed the labor movement in Zimbabwe, and he changed the political landscape in Zimbabwe. I think those are two major achievements that we must remember as a tribute to this gallant son of Zimbabwe.
I don't have a history that goes back to the 1980s with Morgan. I think I don't have even up to 5 interactions with him. But in the kind of work that I do, it was like he was sitting before me on a daily basis, dealing with victims of political violence. I think for me, what hit me continues to be the resilience that these people who have been persecuted continue to speak so highly of this man. And is this larger than life figure that I eventually also met when I was persecuted. On the day that he came to Chikurubi maximum security prison, I had just been taken to hospital, and I thought I had missed meeting this man. And when I was eventually admitted to hospital, he came and visited me in hospital. And with that chuckle of his, he was like, how could you get into this work without me knowing that you were recruiting for us? So it turned out to just be a laugh between us. It was like I had met this man for ages before, but that was my first interaction with him. But I think what he has left on the ground, like I'm talking about the victims of political violence, the majority of whom belong to the MDCT, is, I think for me, it's how they believed in the ideals of this man that they had resolved to follow. Because you would ask people, after all this, why are you continuing to be in the party? And you would sense this conviction that people had made a choice. And some of them were actually saying, even if I would die today, I would die a happy person being a member of the MDCT. And on Tuesday, I walked 5 kilometers just to get where the proceedings were. Because where I left the car, I didn't even bargain for that. And yesterday I couldn't even walk because my legs were swollen. Someone was saying it was a free gym, but I had not planned that gym. You need to psych yourself for some of these things, but he deserved that walk for me to get to where the proceedings were happening. May his dear soul rest in peace.
On the 6th of September last year, I was driving from Mutare with a colleague of mine who is of Kenyan origin. So we spoke about opposition politics. He is a supporter of Raila Odinga. And then I said to him, as we were approaching Mavuko, I said to him, you know what? I think I need to go and see Morgan. And then he was a little bit surprised. So I drove straight to Highlands, and then I got to the gate, and there is a security gentleman who is by the gate, and I said, is Morgan there? He says, who are you? I said, I'm Joy Mabenge. He says, where are you from? I didn't understand the actual question. So I said, I am from Chivi, near Mandamabwe. I'm under Chief Watunga. He said, here is what you need to do. You must go to Harvest House and then talk to the Chief of Staff and make an appointment, get a date, and then come and see Morgan. I said, no, who is the Chief of Staff? He gave me the name, and then I pulled out my little cell phone and I called the gentleman and I said, I need to see Morgan. The gentleman said, oh no, that's good. Can you give the gentleman, where are you? I said, at the gate. Can you give that gentleman your cell phone? I gave him the cell phone. He rushed inside. And then he came back. He was instructed, rushed inside, and he came back. And then he says, the president said, I remember it was about 7 minutes past 2. The gentleman came back and said, the president said, come back at 3 o'clock. And so I left and I came back. And I drove in and I had an hour's conversation with Morgan. In fact, when I went to sit down to talk to him, his security details were around him, and then typical of Morgan, he said, you know, so they were told, meaning you can wait somewhere there. So there was me, him, and one other gentleman that I found there, and we spoke. Honestly, I had nothing that I'd gone there for other than just catching up. And we did a bit of catching up. We laughed about certain experiences in the GNU when I was a little bit closer there. And he said to me, oh, so tomorrow if you have time, let's meet again and have a working session. Now the moral of this, what I'm sharing with you now, is about accessibility. Morgan was accessible. He was accessible to a man with no name, as in I have no name, I am not in the party structures. I am just Joy Mabenge who occasionally comments here and there. I did not think that he would give me an ear. Accessibility is very, very important. Giving people an ear is very, very important. That is the legacy of the Morgan Tsvangirai that I knew. Long live the spirit of Morgan Tsvangirai, long live.
Morgan Tsvangirai is somebody I'm very willing to speak about because he was an iconic figure and he still remains an iconic figure in Zimbabwe. And he animated a lot of my students. I used to use a lot of the ZCTU, MDC, as well as all the political party and other organizations that he belonged to. Because I teach industrial sociology. And at the time, when the workers' movement was gathering steam, it was very important for me to have local examples that I could point to. And Morgan Tsvangirai came at the right time because he started organizing workers. And eventually, his exploits became so important, and he emerged as a leader who was able to implement the strategies that we had read about, my students and I were reading about in the books. And it became very easy to teach because I had a local example that I could point to. And this was very, very important, really, in terms of workers and workers' organizations in different circumstances, because we could deal with workers, the history of workers during colonialism, just after independence, during the honeymoon period, as well as workers after ESAP. And of course, Morgan Tsvangirai was really in the middle of all that. He was an ardent trade unionist, and he also managed to animate a lot of social groups. So it was very good for us because I could point to the idea of workers' organizations linking up with social movements in order to build up a formidable kind of alliance which would actually champion working people's rights. And this was really very important for me, especially since we didn't have many textbooks that could chronicle, analyze, and explain some of these issues from a very informed perspective, a third world perspective. Now, Tsvangirai also managed to animate a lot of the workers, a lot of students, and a lot of other social groups in such a way that it was easy to understand how all these groups were organically linked to each other. And of course, when he went on to lead the MDC, when it moved into a political party, into a political movement, he managed to draw a lot of people into the big tent that the MDC became. And in that way, it was very, very interesting in Zimbabwe to address a lot of the issues with bridging the workers' movement, the movement of working of the unemployed, the people who had been marginalized, those people who didn't have jobs. And he put himself on the line, won an election, and he is the president we never had. And in that way, you also find that he's also a towering historic figure, because in the struggles that he undertook, we begin to learn about how things happen and how they don't happen. And in terms of the MDC and its capacity to take or to fail to take power during situations of stress. And right now, we have found ourselves in a dispensation where we have a government, which is what I call the velvet coup, right? Which is very, very suave. It wears a suit. It tries to be very nice. It has good language. It masters all the correctness, political, social, and economic correctness. And I wish he'd have lived it long enough to try and navigate us through some of these processes. So, because we make history with whatever is available, Zimbabwe also managed to make history with the life of Morgan Tsvangirai, right? We cannot change the history, but at least we can learn from it. And we did learn that under the conditions that prevailed when Morgan Tsvangirai was rising, he managed to do a lot of things that he thought were impossible. So from that perspective, I think we take off our hats to him, we take off our dukus to him, or those who don't wear hats and so forth, and we really, really do understand that you make revolutions with material that you have at the time when you are living. Sometimes you wish you had more, and other time, but you can't actually deal with what you don't have. But what we have, and what the legacy is left, is a legacy which shows us that struggle is possible. But he also taught us magnanimity, because Morgan could have plunged this country into war in 2008. And he chose not to do that. which was really, really big of him. How many people would have eschewed the opportunity to fight for the presidency in many different ways? He could have started a guerrilla movement, he could have started all kinds of things, and he didn't. Here we are today. I hope that a lot of young people here will take forward his legacy, because I think my generation probably, we do not have enough. We might have a bit to contribute historical, like I'm doing now, but that younger people who are here will be able to take forward his legacy in ways that distinguish and honor his name. And I'm saying, long live Morgan Tsvangirai, and I'm hoping that one of us is going to be able to write Morgan's biography, right? And honor him by giving him his due, by giving him his place in the history of Zimbabwe.